because whenever it's not like the Seattle offense lacks playmakers, in the position groups. The offensive line is its own issue. Um, but they've got weapons certainly,
Hmm.
and tight end maybe is their not maybe is certainly their weakest position in terms of talent. AJ Barner was fun. I didn't expect him to be the pass catcher he became down the year.
Yeah.
From what I remember out of Michigan, he was purely like, well, and especially with Michigan's offense, not this current CF college football season, but the year before when they won it all, unfortunately. He was a run block. He was a blocking guy. I
Hmm.
was like, oh, great, sure. We need another blocking tight end, with Seattle, and Noah Fant really hasn't been super big. Um, but my point is, offensive coordinators, when they've got that sort of talent, you either find ways to get them the ball in open space, you know, whether it is like the pop pass or the creative route concepts, that sort of thing, or just straight up handing them the ball
Hmm.
in some receivers aspects, or yeah, like you said, you play off of them. And I don't think they did too much of that with DK this year with Ryan Grubb. uh and again I mentioned the transition that brings us to Ryan Grubb. Do you agree with the decision to fire Grubb here after just the one season? And what are your thoughts on the offensive coordinator or Chase, if that's anything that's on your radar? Because I know there's some names early that I think Seattle is looking at.
Hmm. Um, my knee-jerk reaction as soon as I got the news, which was you just texting me, "Grub gone," uh, while I was like making lunch, was, "Oh no, that sucks." Because like I said, slightly better luck. This is a playoff team. I don't like dumping Grub immediately after that kind of season. But of course, we don't know what went on behind closed doors, what conversations Grub and McDonald had, if there was some kind of ultimatum or deal like, hey, this team needs to go to the playoffs, or you need to reach certain quotas, and other things like that. Or we're going to have to move on. What kind of philosophy McDonald wants, and if Grub wasn't meeting that. McDonald did a press conference the day after the Grubb news and was kind of, when he talked about the offensive coordinator search and the decision to move on from Grubb, he was not cagey, but like a little bit avoidant of those kind of questions for what specifically went on,
Mm,
um, which tells me that like there were obviously there's conversations, right? The coaching staff talks to each other, but there was some kind of thing going on that we don't really know about. So kind of where I am now is that I still don't like it or agree with it. Like I think that the team should iterate on where they are now, to improve to take that next step rather than trying to um, radically redefine, especially after just one season and 17 games, which is, you know, kind of not really a good sample size for what uh, Grub system really could have done. Like I would have loved to have seen them, in the tournament to see what kind of explosive things can happen when it's, this is your last game, you have to win,
mm.
things like that. Because we saw this year, um, this offense, especially Gino, playing best with their backs against the wall. Now, oftentimes, especially in that middle stretch, it was too little, too late. But they did make a lot of their best plays, especially at the end. There were a couple games that came down to the last drive that Gino was able to pull it out with. Um, so I would have liked to have seen Grub Grub's system again with like a more refined offense, certainly with a better offensive line, which I don't want to really keep harping on because like I feel like it's been talked about enough, and I also feel like it's not wholly the issue. But I understand where the team, like why the team made their decision, more now than I did then. As for like who's coming next, I don't know. I'm scared of speculating. Um, it fills me with a deep dread. So I hope whoever it is, Maybe they'll be able to run the ball more. I mean, like that's the obvious thing that you want to say, right? Is that okay? They fired Grubb because he didn't run the ball. But it's got to be more complicated than that. There's got to be something going on there.
Yeah, and there was stuff throughout the course of the year, where they like the different Seahawks beat guys were talking about, that sort of thing and not wanting to run the ball, complementary football, that sort of thing. It does feel too quick to me, just, without, like you mentioned, the sort of the deeper things and what could have been taking place. Um, yeah, it does feel like I don't remember the last time because I know that didn't happen under Pete Carroll. Like that, Pete stuck by his guys,
Hmm.
coordinator, coaching wise, whether it was for better or for worse. Um, remember Daryl Bevel? Um,
Do I
you
have to?
know, I would, yeah, probably not, but you know, so, but yeah, to that point, to go to what you were mentioning, and I think is the biggest aspect of this whole thing is the philosophy talk, a change in philosophy, because you know obviously something happened. Obviously, there were disagreements and the whole Ryan Grubb era as a Seahawks coach, starting at, him being seen at Dino's Pub in Renton, to now this moving on from him for philosophical reasons is fascinating. And it will be interesting to see who the Seahawks go at to move on from him. I know the one of the names that I've seen is the Lions offensive line coach, and a bunch of Seahawks Twitter went to posting this like fridge of a man, and they're like, "Tell him he's not going to run the football." And I'm like, "Yeah, I wouldn't tell him that. He'd probably eat me." Um, so,
He's done it before. He will do it again.
oh Lord, he coming. We'll wrap up our first circling the nest here with uh, we'll go from talking about an offensive guy to a defensive guy.
Hello there, everybody. Charles Hamaker here with Circling Seattle Sports. I'm joined by Jen Barnes of Rough and Tumble that we happen to be at right now.
Yeah.
Jen, why don't you talk to me a little bit about what we're announcing today, which is our partnership.
I'm so excited about this. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I think all of us here at Rough and Tumble are big fans of what you and your team at Circling Seattle Sports does. And so, I know you know this, but when you came to me with this idea, it just seemed pretty natural. And it's not just me. I think a lot of people in the sports community in Seattle also really respect you and your team. So it's exciting to kind of see these two things melding together, and we're really excited to start implementing some of the things and then hopefully seeing you guys a little bit more often.
Yeah, and so with what Jen says about seeing us more often, we've got a few things in the works, but you'll see watch parties here. We'd like to do a few different of our community drives, which you'll hear about here in a little bit. From now, we've got to make our announcements one at a time. I can't drop everything.
Not everything
right.
all at once.
But this has been a home for a lot of our team, whether it's myself, our friend, our photographer Liz is behind the camera. Liz is here often, so our team has kind of adopted this place kind of like our own since I saw you at our soft launch. So, it's been great to have that support. And in a lot of ways, and part of the reason I wanted to do this was the Rough and Tumble embodies a lot of what Circling Seattle Sports wants to do. Obviously with women's sports, with the storm and the rain, but just being, having the game on, every game on.
Yep.
How much of that, did you see a line kind of even before this idea was mentioned when I first met you?
I think it's always felt like that. I mean, you and your team were here on opening night, and you just feel like you're part of the space, so it felt like really natural. And the fact that you actually cover all the sports really makes your group stand out. So you are always covering all the rain games, all the storm games. UW women's softball, UW women's basketball, UW women's hockey. We love it. So all of those things, and obviously passionate M's fans, passionate Hawks fans, and passionate Kraken and Sounders fans. So really, from our perspective, those two things meshed really well.
So, I mean, you heard it from Jen herself, but this will be our home for all of these events, whether it's you can't make it to these games at home, we're always going to direct you to Rough and Tumble, and obviously the games on the road as well. All these, I mean, we're talking about the rain, they've got their schedule out finally, but this will be our home for that.
Great.
The Storm games on the road, this is our home.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes.
I love it.
And when I mentioned it to Jen, when I first had this idea come up, I had this idea come up wearing a pink wig.
Yes, you did.
Ahead of Megan Rapinoe's final regular season home game for the Reign this past year.
Yeah.
I told her it's because I wanted this to feel genuine.
Yep.
I wanted a connection to feel genuine, and it does. So that's what this is. Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, and I'm so excited to finally announce this partnership.
I can't wait.